Welcome to BizTech's Enterprise Technology Show. Our guest today is Sandie Overtveld, the Vice President and General Manager, Asia Pacific at WalkMe. Now, WalkMe was founded in 2011 with a mission to make digital adoption for employees and customers simple while increasing enterprise productivity. Now, the company pioneered the whole digital adoption platform category to enable organizations to measure, drive, and act to maximize their digital transformation. Now, to tell us more, welcome to the show, Sandie.
Brian, thank you very much for having me on.
Now, Sandie, for a start, give us an overview of WalkMe, its history, and also its footprint in the Asia Pacific region.
So, as you said, WalkMe was founded just over 10 years ago, really as a way to provide guidance through using an application, and has evolved as a category, or created a category called digital adoption platforms. And that really is much more than guidance. In the old days, we would release a new product, and I hate saying things like the old days, but because really it's not that long ago. We would release a new application and we print a big fat manual with what the processes were, and then we'd bring everyone into a room and we'd train them on how to use that. But in today's world, with the amount of software technologies and the continual changes that software as a service brings, that is just no longer an option. So it's really about understanding the data of how people use software, then making sure that they actually get the information they need or automation they need where they need it, and then creating a great user experience. And that's how we think about it as WalkMe, is how do we get people to adopt all those new technologies that are being rolled out continuously without feeling apprehensive about it.
Okay, and I want to drill down a little bit more about digital adoption platform software. Now, that's layered on top of other software products, right? Tell us a little bit about how it helps to accelerate proficiency among users.
Sure. So think of it as a glass pane over your application that you will be oblivious to when you're using it. Humans don't think in software. I don't wake up in the morning going, oh, let me use this great piece of software. I come to work and I have certain tasks to do, which are processes. And then we have software to help us actually be more productive to do that. But I may, I'll take a very simple example. If I want to take leave, now obviously this is not to do my job, but this is to take some time off, then I don't go, oh, what software package do I take my leave in? What I do is I go to my calendar and I go, which days can I take off? So why can I not in that calendar then automate the task of taking leave? Because I think of it as a process of taking leave. I don't think of it as a task of, oh, now I need to go to my HCM application and log what my leave is. And the same can be true for if a customer wants a quote. Those are items that can be automated and where specific information can be provided to a user so they can do that task or process really easily. And so that's what WalkMe does, is it sits as a layer over various applications and lets product owners or CIOs understand where an employee is getting stuck in an application or in a process, and then deploy information or automation at the point where they're getting stuck, so that you're continuously improving processes and allowing, from an employee perspective, it feels like a much better experience. But from a company perspective, I'm saving time, which means I'm saving money.
So from a CIO perspective, I can actually track the progress in terms of efficiency on a dashboard or something like that?
Correct. So in a dashboard, I can see usage across all the applications, how many users are using it all the time. And if I've deployed WalkMe on that application, then I can actually track how is someone going through a process. So quote to cash, for example, I can say, now that we've deployed WalkMe, we can see that on average it takes an employee 15 minutes to create a quote. Let's go and see where they're getting stuck in effectively what's a form. Which fields are they spending the most time in, and where do they make the most errors, or where do they drop off? And then we can deploy content or automation at that point, which removes that bottleneck, and then we can see how we can move it from 15 minutes down to 10 minutes or maybe 5 minutes. And so you're continuously evaluating how efficient users are, which I think is good from a CIO perspective. But as I say, the way it feels to the employee is, you just made my job easier.
So this is really Kaizen on steroids for
Yes.
technology. So because really as a CIO now, I can, instead of having large teams of people working on looking at efficiency all the time, I can have small teams of really good people just looking at the software, identifying the processes that are bottlenecks, and then just working on those little areas.
Correct. But think about it. If you're a CEO of a company and you set your top 5 goals for the year, I would guess that every year one of the top 5 goals is increase productivity and save money. And so really it's about taking that down and then breaking that down to goals where you're going to focus this year. Where do we think that employees are spending more time doing processes where we could actually drive efficiency? So instead of having to hire more people, we can make it easier for people to do the job that they're doing. And so you may say, for example, we've had the Great Resignation. So a lot of people are trying to onboard new folks remotely or in a hybrid situation. So how could I take my onboarding process and take it from 3 months down to 3 weeks, or make someone productive from 6 months to 2 months instead? And then actually looking at all the processes and components need to do in that, and deploying the right information and automation so that you can accelerate that onboarding and make it feel great.
Now, Sandie, how has WalkMe experienced this whole digital transformation journey through a customer lens? Because obviously solutions like yourself accelerated in terms of adoption during the COVID period.
Look, absolutely. And our solution has evolved by working with our customers. And digital transformation is such a broad term used by everybody, and it means so many things. And if you're moving from a manual process to a digital process, that's kind of easy and obvious. But often the digital transformation is not just digitizing processes, it's continual optimization of those processes. And I think if you talk to most CIOs and CEOs, they still struggle to measure the impact of a digital transformation and the return on investment or continual return on investment of those transformations. And so it's really important to have a digital adoption platform that lets you measure before, during, and after, and do this continual improvement. And I'll give you an anecdotal example of a customer that we worked with, and I won't mention who they are, but when we came in and they wanted to look at digital adoption, they said, well, let's put the data component on and see how people are using our software today. And the CEO said, I want you to stack rank it by which form in an application takes the longest, or where people spend the most time. And funnily enough, it was called the quick form. And the CEO laughed and he said, I won't tell you who the GSI is, but I just spent $150,000 designing the quick form to make the application easier to use. And when I look at the form now, I can see that instead of taking the 4 pages it used to take into a single form, everyone's trying to put all their pet projects in a single form. And now that's taking the longest to use. And so that's often what people have, is they come up with a suggestion on how to do it. But then as it gets deployed through the organization, if you're not measuring how that transformation is actually taking place, something that was supposed to save a lot of time may end up taking a lot more time. And that's why it's so important to measure continuously through the process.
Could you share with us some customer success stories that you've had in the Asia Pacific region that have made a huge impact on the operations?
Absolutely. So, and actually, you're welcome to go to our website and have a look at some of the customers that are prepared to speak openly about it. But, very specifically, Blackwoods in Australia, who's part of the Wesfarmers Group, did a big deployment of CRM and ERP. And they did it during and post-COVID, and they were doing it across multiple stores. And they said, we were trying to think of, as we do this major transformation and implementation of a new Microsoft technology, how are we going to get everybody on board, and how are we going to find out where the challenges lay? And so they deployed WalkMe as part of that process and as part of testing what those processes were before they deployed them, and do continual improvements. And encourage everybody to read the case study. They're very open about the huge amount of time and money that they saved versus how relatively inexpensive the implementation piece was. And I couldn't do it justice. Go read what they had to say. It's phenomenal.
One of the key things with this, and you touched on it briefly, is really the people factor in the transformation. Walk us through some of the challenges in trying to align employees into embracing change.
Well, nobody likes change, right? Have you ever met anybody who goes, "Oh, I love change," especially in your work environment? We always think about people, process, and technology. And some people are fooled into thinking that buying the technology means you solve the problem, but you need to actually map out what your process is and see if it's efficient. And then you need to help people actually adopt that process. So very often you see, it's getting less with software as a service, but previously you would see someone spending millions of dollars deploying a new ERP or CRM system, only to find that by the time they rolled it out to the users didn't like how it worked, and so just chose not to use their technology. Or, as humans, we're very quick at finding out what the shortcut is. So if it's a page with 50 fields on it, but I realize really quickly that it only tests for 4, I tell all my friends, and I never fill in more than 4 fields. That's just how we are. And so, until you as a person understand how you can benefit from a change is typically something you resist. And so what we try to do with a digital adoption technology is just make it feel natural, or get people used to doing a task in a certain way, and then just change some of the underlying technology that it doesn't feel to an employee as a change to them. But on the back end, there's a big change that drives high productivity, or that helps us to gain information or insight that can get us to move the business forward faster.
And Sandie, having worked in enterprise technology myself, I completely agree with you in terms of the fact that the user often is left out, well, in the past, left out of that whole change management process, and to use a term that's very old, change management. But really today, a lot of employees have embraced, because of the COVID situation, have embraced change in a lot more open manner and in a more agile manner, because they kind of had to.
Correct. Well, and as I say, if you ask them, it's because they had to. I'll give you some statistics. The average large enterprise company uses 700 different software applications, which, if you think about it, it's enormous. Absolutely. And the average employee has to use 8 to 10 software applications to do their day-to-day job. So, that alone, trying to deal with that, if you go to a new company and trying to understand how that works, it's a significant piece. But if the user experience in that is really bad, and it causes you stress, or you don't like the way it makes you do your job, then because there's such a shortage of talent, you see what's happening with the Great Resignation. People just go, I don't like how this works. I don't like working here. I'm moving on somewhere else. And so I think for companies, more and more, they're thinking about what the employee experience with it is. And if they didn't, and they've had to go through the change of staff, then they definitely think about it as they onboard new people, and how hard it is to onboard people remotely or in a hybrid situation to maintain culture and productivity, and get them, as productive as possible, as quickly as possible. And then if you add to that software as a service democratizes software or technology, and that the average software as a service company does one new feature release a quarter. If you have 10 applications, that means you're getting 30 changes every quarter. If you're really lucky, it's 10 a month, but the chances are it's 25 in a single month. And if it changes something in how you work, then that's something you have to overcome. And when everybody sat in the office, you would just turn around to the person next to you and say, hey, have you seen the change? Do you know how to do this? And they'd help you. But in the new hybrid or a lot of work from home work, people are more resistant to reach out. And so it's more and more important to actually provide that information to them as they hit that point, to make it feel like you're trying to help them through that upgrade process.
Now, one of the things that we've talked about in at length was really around efficiency, change, improved productivity. But there's also the other aspect of digital adoption platforms, which is really to perhaps enable new business models, new revenue opportunities. Sandie, could you kind of walk us through some of those opportunities that digital adoption platforms open up?
Look, I think it's, I still think it comes down to productivity. Because it is, how do you get people to do more or to do things differently? If you hear a leader or a member of C staff talking about increasing productivity, the way an employee generally hears that is either my workload's going to increase because they want me to do more, or the amount of staff in my team is going to shrink. Or if we're in sales, your quota is going to go up. That's generally how people hear productivity. And I think what we need to do is make a connection to productivity being actually the positive element of productivity is I'm trying to empower you to make it easier to do your job, so you can spend more time on the tasks that fulfill you and that humans are better at doing. And the mundane tasks become automated and natural for you to complete that job. And yes, absolutely, with the new business models, as you roll out a new business model, you also want people to be able to adapt to that externally as well as internally. So I've talked only about employees, but it's just as important for your customers who are interacting with you digitally to be guided through that too. Not everybody has the same level of technology competence. And so, and especially, if you're not part of the millennial population or coming through, or generation coming through, and you're kind of my age where they just started teaching technologies and calculators, if you haven't been in the technology industry and you haven't kept up with it, then when you see some of the expected interactions with how you do things today, it may feel very daunting. And the idea of digital adoption is that as those processes digitize, and we talk in these kind of broad terms, but very simply, if you're suddenly doing banking on a mobile phone as opposed to walking into a branch, that may be daunting for people, and you may not know how to apply for a credit card or a checkbook or whatever on a mobile app. And so digital adoption technologies will help to understand where a customer is getting stuck and also provide them with the same information to let them use your services like you intended them to use the services, and to make it feel natural. And I use banking, but the same is for citizen services from a government perspective. It should be really easy to interact with the government and with the government services. In Singapore, we're so fortunate that it's such a smart nation, and things like SingPass really just allow us to access all government services through a single logon, but you want that to feel easy to use and natural to use.
Now, Sandie, I want to zoom in on WalkMe now and your footprint in the Asia Pacific. Tell us about your plans for 2022, 2023.
So we officially opened our office in Singapore at the beginning of this year. We have had a presence here, and I should say we went public last year on the NASDAQ. But prior to that, the EDBI, who does invest in companies globally, invested in WalkMe in 2018, and so is therefore a shareholder. And so Singapore's always been really important for us as a location. And so we officially opened the office beginning of this year, grown our footprint significantly. Our focus from a company perspective is on all companies with more than 5,000 employees, and really with a focus on the global 2,000. And that's not that it doesn't work in smaller companies, it's just that that's where we can show the largest value in the shortest space of time. And everybody's looking for time to value. And as we continue to grow, we'll be able to service larger audiences. We have an office in Japan. We have a good office in Australia. And our intent is to continue growing out of Singapore across the Asia Pacific Japan region, and to grow faster than the rest of the company is probably what I'd say. So we just see tremendous opportunity here across all of Asia Pacific.
Sandie, it's been a fascinating conversation. But before we leave, any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
I think if you love your employees and you want to drive productivity that feels like you're doing something for your employees, not at your employees, you really need to take a look at digital adoption in your organization. I'll just give you a sense from a market perspective. There's only a 1% penetration of the digital adoption opportunity. So that shows you how few people are using it today. WalkMe is fortunate enough to have half of that as the market share, but we want to continue to work with companies to really show value for the tech investments they've made and to make that feel natural to their employees.
Sandie, thank you for taking the time to be on the show.
Brian, thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm Brian Fernandez, and I've been speaking to Sandie Overtveld, the Vice President and General Manager, Asia Pacific at WalkMe, on BizTech's Enterprise Technology Show. This video and podcast will be on our various platforms, as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please like and subscribe to our various platforms. Thanks again for tuning in.